Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2021 neo-noir period piece crime drama titled No Sudden Move. Now, No Sudden Move runs for 1 hour and 55 minutes long. It is directed by Steven Soderbergh. The script was written by Ed Solomon. It is produced by Casey Silver. It is composed by David Holmes. The cinematography by Peter Andrews. And it was edited by Marianne Bernard. And the stars of the movie are Don Cheadle, Benecio Del Toro. Let's see, we have Kieran Culikn, Jon Hamm, David Harbour, Ray Liotta, Julia Fox, Brendan Fraser, Amy Seimetz, Noah Jupe, Craig Mums Grant, Frankie Shaw, Bill Duke, and an uncredited cameo from Matt Damon. So, coming from HBO Max under the direction of Steven Soderbergh, No Sudden Move showcases Soderbergh's delving into a provocative narrative using his own multifaceted techniques. A noir film that's saturated with style, No Sudden Move features an ensemble of top-tier performers who seem to get into the groove of the direction Soderbergh is luring them in. I mean, they just seem so natural in their performances that it looks like they're enjoying their roles, and it doesn't feel in any way laborious to them, just as much as it doesn't feel in any way, shape, or form laborious to its viewing audience. Soderbergh truly has directed this indie film straight from the heart. We don't know if the historical accuracies are there, but then again, this is not a documentary, and this is not an authentic, true story of any sorts. It's all a work of fiction, but we don't. But it's somehow a little bit sketchy to know if the sentiments that these characters portray are taken from the standpoints of the events that happened during the setting of this movie or not. But he's not just leading the pack. He's also taking the initiative of operating behind the lenses and editing the movie as well. This actually came as a surprise because a few years ago, Soderbergh was contemplating retiring from the film industry. I mean, he had success with the Oceans series back in the early to mid 2000s, and now, you know, he's been doing this for quite some time, and I guess, he just doesn't find the film industry all that more appealing. Maybe he was thinking of retiring, but somehow had that sudden itch to direct another movie, and so he did. No Sudden Move kind of reminds me a lot like the 1995 Denzel Washington vehicle, and a personal favorite film I enjoyed, the underrated Devil in a Blue Dress. Soderbergh carries the same legacy he has made with his other movies from the past by having a slew of shady characters placed in precarious situations they never fully expected themselves, like the Ocean's movies that he has done. Set in the racially oppressed city at the time, Detroit, in 1954, we observe the oppression which of course has a bit of some racial tensions that was brewing, even though it wasn't as fully examined as we should have. Maybe Soderbergh decided to play it safe on the race game. I think it was may have been only emphasized once, but it's never really fully executed from then on. We don't see too much of the racial oppression except the fact, like when Ronald Russo's character, played by Benicio Del Toro, doesn't feel comfortable sitting in the back seat of a car with a black gangster named Kurt Goins, played by Don Cheadle. The whole idea that the white guy does not want to sit next to the black guy. We see a bit of that. We also see, when they were doing this shady job that would guarantee them a large lump sum of cash, and why Kurt gets the lesser end of the deal, also sometimes sets in motion of racial tensions, but it's not as over the top. I mean, just those few little small scatterings of racial tensions is what we see there. The rest of the way, it almost looks as though as if Russo and Goins have no problems forming a bond with each other. And being that the movie was set in Detroit in 1954, we do observe the oppression and the corruption that occurred at the time. The corruption stems from the auto industry, which was really, really booming. Which is why I guess it made sense that they set the movie in Detroit. Because, of course, back in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the auto industry was booming with Chrysler, with Ford, with GMC, General Electric. They were really, really running the show in Detroit. At one time, Detroit was a bustling city, a land of kind of like a land of opportunity. I mean, it was taking off even bigger than New York City and Chicago at one time. Of course, today Detroit has almost been practically a shell of its former self. But at one time, Detroit was really, really kicking things off, especially in the automobile industry. But at what cost did it take to build these cars? Pollution, capital corruption, people who refuse to make patent changes in the environment, coming up with solutions to stall the toxic chemicals that came from the building of these cars. And their refusal to to change the way you make cars. They're pretty much just fine of making the world a polluted landscape that could come back and bite them in the ass at any time. As long as they're making money, they don't give a shit. They don't give a fuck about the smog and the toxic chemicals that come in the making of cars. No. All they care about is the money. And that's really all that matters to them. Yes, it's another one of these just to show you how corrupt capitalism is and how capitalism is still to this day, even as we speak, a tough shell to crack. I mean, we could try to overcome it, but somehow capitalism still somehow plays a pivotal role in our lives that will not go away anytime soon. Screenwriter Ed Solomon takes us back to the time where the auto industry in Detroit was booming, but for the wrong reasons. Black communities were being taken over as part of the urban renewal, and these super aggressive automaking enterprises will go to great lengths to stay ahead from any suspected adversaries or any suspected apparatuses that could help improve their production of automobiles. Something called a catatonic converter. I can't really pronounce the name of what it is, but it is supposed to be, installed to prevent any further toxins from coming out of these cars. They wanted to keep it hushed and do not want words to come around. The movie contains the always shifting of characters and situations by Soderbergh and Solomon that keeps their viewers intrigued. The urban decay in this film is it's filled with low prolific hoodlums, shady corporate giants, troublesome gangsters, and dishonest middlemen. You have them all in this movie. I don't think there is actually one single character in this movie that is truly honest. At least most of the lead characters. There might be maybe the detective could come across as showing some level of sympathy, but even he gets bribed in by these shady people. That's right. There are really no decent characters in No Sudden Move, whether we all want to admit it or not. It's virtually every person for themselves. If you're looking to trust any character in this movie, well, not gonna happen. The central character behind the narrative is Kurt Goins, played by the amazing Don Cheadle, who's an ex-con who has built a reputation of angering every crime syndicate in the Motor City. It doesn't care. It doesn't matter whether it's the Black Mafia, the Italian Mafia, the Irish Mafia. He has pissed each and every one of them due to the fact that he is a professional con artist. Back on the streets after being incarcerated, Goins, along with Ronald Russo, played by Benecio Del Toro, and Charlie Burns, played by Kieran Culikn, they take a job after being hired by a mysterious recruiter who goes by the name of Doug Jones, played by Brendan Fraser, who I can't believe was so unrecognizable. I mean, like, what the hell happened to him? And this is not me fat shaming Brendan Fraser, but by God, it's like the guy let himself go. I mean, he almost kind of reminds me like he must have took something like the Marlon Brando diet, which was no diet, just eating a lot of junk food, and then asking for more junk food. I mean, I know that he was supposed to also get into character like that to be in a movie called Whale, but man, if you wanted to be so bloated, you could have just laid off the pizza and burgers and just put on a fat suit. just so that I mean, just so that you could have just stayed your regular size like you were. Like I mean, like for example, you would go back to like the late '90s with the Mummy and Brendan Fraser. He was like, by God, he was in like great shape. I mean, he was real buff back then. But now he went from being buff to bloated. I know this seems like I'm taking a shot at him and fat shaming him, but my God, be careful, man. I hope that after this movie and Whale, you cut back. Eh, you know, love you, man, Brendan Fraser. And it's good to see that you are making a comeback to movies after being gone for so long. But by God, what happened to you? I'm just saying, nothing personal. But I guess this is just for you to stay in character. I don't understand why these actors have to look a certain part regarding, like manipulating their weight, whether it be gaining weight or losing weight, just to get a part. That's actually pretty dangerous when you think about it. Your weight does not like to be circle jerked around like that. Your physical body is not a toy, it's a tool. Something for you to think about. So, anyways, this recruiter named Doug Jones is to watch over a General Motors accountant who goes by the name of Matt Wirtz, played by David Harbour, as Kurt and Ron will keep the family hostage while Charlie, like Wirtz to his facility, to search for some esoteric documents allegedly hidden in his boss's safe. So Kurt and Ron take Mr. Wirtz out of his home, goes to Ohio to look for his boss's home in order to search for some hidden documents that is a potential get-rich-quick scheme. Meanwhile, Charlie is keeping the other family members hostage, having the little kids go into the playroom while the wife is being held hostage. And as usual, like in most Soderbergh movies, nothing ever transpires all that easily. The documents are not there. Charlie gets killed. And before you know it, the gangsters have all come out to roost while being followed by a nicely delivered soundtrack. Goins and Russo form a frangible alliance, which is a bit fragile, mostly because of race issues, but they do sort of form an alliance knowing that they only have each other to trust and really nobody else. Knowing that they have been betrayed, but their need for more money prevents them from leaving Detroit. Yeah, I know, it's another one of those cliches about how people just want to leave Detroit. But because of money situations, they can't. Knowing that these documents seem like a popular commodity that everyone is after, there must be some high level of currency behind it. And if they have the documents that have any important financial gains, they can auction it off to the highest bidder that will likely give them more money. But with every criminal syndicate lurking around for these documents, that's not going to be that easy, as bigger criminal organizations are after these documents, led by big time gangsters like Frank Capelli, played by the late Ray Liotta, who looked quite intense as he always does, and somebody by the name of Aldrich Watkins, played with subtle charisma by Bill Duke. Yeah, everyone is after Goins and Russo. Solomon gives us the impression that thieves and gangsters will likely shamelessly turn against their own employees, and they have. I mean, in the gangster industry, and when it comes to burglars, they got no problems of even turning against themselves. It's a dangerous world out there, folks. There's no room for fucking around. The movie definitely has a myriad of backstabbing, double crosses, and plenty of hypocrisy among various groups and syndicates, and even people who you least likely to think are backstabbers turn out to be. I mean, just think about it. You look at Frank Capelli's wife, Vanessa, who has obviously been physically abused by her husband, and then when given the opportunity, she shoots him. All the while, Russo, who had successfully gained something like $375,000, he and Vanessa, who he has been sleeping around with, go off on some kind of a journey, only to realize that she's not this vulnerable damsel in distress, but it turns out that she's just as deviant as Capelli, or may have learned from his page book, that she eventually shoots him and says, "Fuck Capelli, fuck Russo, I just want the money." But the then the tables are turned on her, and she is forced to give back the money to the automobile industry, led by some executive by the name of Mike Lowen, who also tries to con Goins and Russo in any way, shape, or form. And, I think he kind of like gives them, I don't know, something like hush money of some sort just to keep their mouths shut. But eventually, once Detective Finney, played by Jon Hamm, catches on about her murder, her double murder, one looked like it was played out of defense, the other was played out of malice. Well, apparently, she had to give back the money, leaving her with absolutely, positively nothing. Soderbergh seems to be on cloud nine with this kind of project, as everyone is leading their own destination and falling into their own demise. Is it just me, or is Ronald Russo easily one of the most naive, gullible individuals out there? It seems that people just seem to backstab him every way, shape, or form. That's kind of the impression I get. I mean, I'm not saying that the acting's bad. The acting is actually one of the highlights of this movie. Most of the camera angles are really well executed. They stem from the use of wide angle lenses. The setting has that visual look where the lighting has that modern flair, while the landscapes give it that vintage 1950s backdrop with the props, the cars, the clothing, and the lingo that was used in that area. I just love the jazzy soundtrack by David Holmes because, let's face it, a movie of this caliber, gangster movies, it's just that jazz and blues always seem to work very well in these noir thrillers. And I think David Holmes deserves a lot of credit. It brings you back to an era where Detroit was a booming metropolis, where the car industry was at its peak, while also becoming a welcoming home to gangster activity, which ran rampant at that time. And I think that it was just well executed. I mean, of course, the jazzy soundtrack was just something that preleads to Motown, which Motown actually is, a series of 60s themed type music along with some jazz and blues implemented to give it that authentic sound that is enough to appease to its black audience, but it's also a welcoming ground for non-blacks to also enjoy as well if you're into these kind of music. It was universal type of music, the Motown industry. And jazz and blues can also be for everyone. Even though the majority of jazz and blues are mostly performed by African Americans, but it's for everyone to enjoy. And that nobody should be segregated into like what type of music one should listen to. Music should be for everyone, regardless of race, skin, color, religion, and whatnot. And I think David Holmes did a good job of displaying that. If there were any weaknesses to the movie, it would have to be that some of the supporting characters were badly downplayed. Unlike Don Cheadle, who was Oscar worthy in his performance, guys like Jon Hamm's character needed more airtime. He was only on for a very limited time, and he was only on briefly. Also, Julia Fox, who in the end becomes a pivotal character, but was hardly really noticeable overall. It's still pleasant that many of the top quality performers show up in Soderbergh's No Sudden Move. It's still executed the way Soderbergh prefers it, which is why through all of Soderbergh's triumphs and failures, there is something that will likely spark interest. I think, if I'm not mistaken, George Clooney was up for one of the three characters. I don't know whether he was up for the role of Ronald Russo. I think he probably would have done quite well in that role. Maybe even the supporting character of Doug Jones. Or even Ray Liotta's character of Frank Capelli. I think he could have been either good in one of those three roles. He was asked to be in that, but he kind of turned it down for whatever reason. I don't know. Anyhow, this movie was really good. It had a great nostalgic feel to it. It felt like something that was taken from the noir thrillers that we have known and loved during the golden era of movies back in the 50s and 60s, when these movies were really running rampant. Maybe even the 40s too. Noir films were very prevalent in those time periods, and we got a chance to see a little bit of that in this 2021 movie. Directed by Steven Soderbergh, written by Ed Solomon. I would highly recommend people to see this movie. It's really, really good, very interesting. And it does keep your levels up high. If you're expecting to see a lighthearted film with likable characters, well, I got 2 words for you. Actually, no, 3 words for you. Forget about it. Not gonna happen, folks. So therefore, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give No Sudden Move from 2021 an 8 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Rider saying Keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.